Hi everyone, my name is Isabella Turner. The first nature cam that I chose to watch was of the African river wildlife in Kenya. On that camera, I saw giraffes and monkeys, and the thing I was most surprised about was when the camera moved and it panned over to the tree that had a bunch of the monkeys in it. For some reason, I didn't think someone like sat there and monitored that all day and controlled that, but that made me realize that that does happen. So I think that was what I was most surprised about, was that someone does sit there and watch that and zoom to where the action is. The second nature cam that I watched was of the giant panda exhibit at the Smithsonian Zoo. The biggest shock to me here was there wasn't really people in it. And being at a zoo, I expected to see, the people that were at the zoo. But in reality, I only saw a few people one time when the camera was like panning to a different spot. So that was pretty shocking. I chose these two cameras because I wanted to see one in like the natural wildlife and then one in a zoo exhibit and sort of compare the two. While watching these cams, I felt very sort of curious and interested. I didn't know so many live nature cams even existed, let alone did I ever watch one for myself. And I was also quite surprised by how clearly you could hear like the noises of the animals in the distance. That was pretty surprising and interesting, I thought. Part of me did feel intrusive while watching the live cams, while part of me didn't. I still believe that we should leave the wild alone as much as possible, except for when it's like beneficial or serves helpful purposes. So in this manner, yes, I did feel intrusive because the wild shouldn't necessarily be reachable through like anyone's camera. But on the other hand, I didn't feel intrusive while watching the panda exhibit at the zoo because its purpose was to track the behaviors of the pandas. That was written in the little description. And I was slightly in awe because it's cool to see animals live, but it also made me feel like my excitement, if I ever, went on an African safari myself or anything like that, it made me feel like my excitement would be less. So I was in awe, but I was also thinking, like, would this be as cool if I were to see it in person now? So, as I said before, I don't think we should want a world in which everything is mapped, monitored, or accessible because it sort of takes the fun out of experiencing things for yourself in real life. Although these technologies are fun to get a glimpse at, what animals are doing in Africa or what animals are doing at the zoo, I feel as though over time there will be a decrease in like sort of the longing to want to go and experience these things firsthand. So when they do serve beneficial purposes, I think it's okay. But I do think the wildlife should sort of be left alone. I think there's a sense of secrecy and mystery in the wild, and we should sort of leave it that way. Growing up as a kid, my friends and I would always play in the woods behind my house, and we'd build forts and like pretend to be characters and things like that. And if we would have been being videotaped or monitored or being on nature cams, I feel like we wouldn't have had as much fun. There's a sense of when you're in the wild, it's just you in the wild. So the wild should be a place of escape and not really a source of anyone to find out what's going on. This transformation of the wild feels like a fait accompli rather than something to debate because these surveillances sort of just showed up without much discussion. And I'm sure whatever company put up that camera that I watched in Kenya, I'm sure they didn't really ask the people of Kenya or the giraffes in the video if it was okay that they were putting their cameras there. They just put it up without much discussion, which is why it feels like a fait accompli. And that's what's happening a lot nowadays. These are just sort of popping up. So I do believe surveillance of the wild should be kept to a minimum and only serve beneficial purposes, and that not just anything in the wild should be surveyed. Thank you all for watching my video, and I hope you enjoyed.